Welcome to the Nomad Futurist Podcast, where ideas shape the future and visionaries redefine what's possible. Join us as we dive deep into the evolution of technology, society, and human potential, spotlighting the voices driving change and reimagining our world. Connect with us and join us at media.nomadfuturist.org. The future is a story we write together. Let's kick it off. Here are your hosts, Phil and Nabil.
Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your co-host Nabil Mahmood, live from Reston, Virginia at Data Center Frontier Show.
This is your co-host Mahmood and Koblence, also live in Reston, Virginia at the Data Center Frontier Trends Summit.
And this is Bob Cassiliano, Chairman and CEO of 7x24 Exchange. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, sir, so much for taking the time to join us today, Bob. You're certainly a legend in the space. I had the opportunity of speaking at several of your events over the years, and you guys have actually done an amazing job in at least getting the voice of the sector together. Before we get started, let's peel the onion just a little bit. Could you tell our viewers and listeners here, how did you get into the space? You've had a long journey, 35, 40 years, give or take. That's pretty much how long the sector has been in existence.
So I was running technology operations at Solomon Brothers when a colleague in the industry at Morgan Stanley gave me a call and said, listen, there's this organization, and at that time it was called the Uninterruptible Uptime Users Group.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. And he said, listen, we'd like you to be part of the group. And so I met in a restaurant in New Jersey called Don Pepe's in Newark with the original founders, which was Ken Brill, John Jackson, Howard Levison, Paul Fox, Frank Giannanella, whole group, and Dennis Cronin, of course, also.
Well, I remember at least two of them, Frank and Dennis. Brilliant. So what happened there on edge?
So what came out of that meeting was I accepted, and they brought me on board as a director. The next year I was the president, and about 2 years later I became the chairman, and I've been the chairman of the organization ever since.
What year is that? When was it?
So it started in 1989. I came on in 1990. And the organization was a balance between technology and engineering, or facilities, as it was called. The whole purpose was those organizations used to work in like a stovepipe, right? And the idea was, let's have an event that we could bring both groups together so they would understand the challenges. The challenges that technology says they never want the systems to go down, and facilities say you got to maintain the systems. So each of them had to understand each other's problem, because in the end, it's all about business objectives and the business.
We talk about the evolution, the super quick evolution of technology. And a lot of the folks that talk at these conferences talk about how unique and new the challenges are. And one thing I always harken back to, I started in our industry in 1996. And ultimately, as new as some of these challenges feel, we are still talking about copper touching copper and glass touching glass and large scale air conditioning rooms. And it's just really a manipulation of how we're leveraging those rooms. The problems that you saw in 1990, which I think the majority of the audience would suggest that, like the dawn of the commercialized internet age, the kind of web 1.0, it's like the 1995, 1996 timeframe. So based on what the organization at that time, what were the applications when you started that people were referring to as the critical applications?
Well, what was driving 7x24 Exchange at the time was the problems in the industry, right? It was all about, remember, uninterruptible uptime, right? So in those days, in the early days, hardware was the failure. When they fixed the hardware, software was the issue. When they fixed the software, the buildings became the issue, okay? So that's where we had these conferences, and the issues over the years were the fifth harmonic with respect to power, watts per square foot, client-server tech. When client-server technology came in, you couldn't believe how hard it was to even get the board to get off the mainframe stuff. And no, we had to speak about client-server. And then, of course, energy efficiency, became an issue. We worked closely with the Department of Energy and actually worked with the Green Grid. The Green Grid had a meeting in Washington, D.C., which I attended as a representative from 7x24 Exchange. There was ASHRAE, Uptime, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, 7x24 Exchange, and Green Grid that literally certified what Green Grid had done all the work, don't get me wrong, but had certified that measurement was a good measurement to go forward with. In those days, we even talked about WUE, right? Water utilization effectiveness.
Right. Whichever one thinks they invented 2 days ago.
No, we talked about that, but we put it on the side because it was hard enough to get PUE done. So yeah, Green Grid did a great job. It's a terrific barometer on measuring efficiency in the data center, and it's a good target for individuals to shoot for or companies to shoot for.
So one of the things that you actually brought up earlier in the conversation is the lack of transparency, lack of collaboration that you experienced in the early 90s, the facilities, the technology stack, application stack. Now, 35 years into this now, do you think are we getting closer to it or the gap getting bigger?
Yeah, it's improved. I actually did a magazine article many years ago. They asked this question, how are you going to fix it? I said, make them work for the same manager. By the way, I think that's evolved over time.
Why? It's because common enemies make friends.
So, but to answer your question, Mama, it is better. It's not perfect, but it's certainly much better.
So there, the complexities have certainly started to increase quite a bit. When you started your career, and I don't want to put a number there, but what was the uptime expectation?
So it was in the 90s, but it wasn't the high 90s.
Correct. So now we're looking at 9 nines of availability.
Now you're looking at, people don't want anything, right?
Exactly.
It's a 9999. It's a lot of nines.
Exactly. So 9 nines of availabilities versus a high 90 percentile, right? So that's one part of the complexity. And then the user base, the number of applications has increased significantly as well. We are now developing and deploying new technologies and language models that's increasing the layer of complexity again. And then you've got sustainability, you've got artificial intelligence, and you've got the climate challenges that have started to come along with it because now our efficiency ratios are totally skewed. So how do we continue to address these challenges and get everybody on the same page?
Well, because I think these conferences, like the one we're in, as well as what DCD does, what 7x24 Exchange does, what iMasons does, and Uptime Institute, all of them try to put information out. They don't all have conferences, right? iMasons basically attends conferences, they don't run conferences. Same with Uptime. We use the research of Uptime Institute. So they'll speak at our conferences because we don't do research, but we use their research. They'll come and speak at our events. So does Data Center Dynamics. With respect to sustainability, iMasons called us one day. It was 10 minutes before I was ready to get on stage, and they had a video that they made on sustainability. And they requested that we play it. So we did that. And we'll do anything that provides value to the attendees. So to your point, I think that's how we get the message across by these events or by distributing media, whether it's newspapers that all these organizations have or newsletters, and try to get the word out. In my mind, the three big challenges are AI, sustainability, and the talent shortage in the data center.
Yeah, before we get to AI, which I think is going to be the elephant in the room is the wrong word. You started, I'm always fascinated by this because I started in 96, you took over your position now in 1990. And I just think from 1996 to now, if I could have asked myself, if I had envisioned somebody talking about a 600 kW or 1 megawatt rack, it's insane.
Those are building.
So I think when I started, like the concept was you'll never see more than 15 amps of 110 A and B in a cabinet. That's because the hard drives were like this big. Could you have ever imagined a scenario where we went from what the power utilization was back in the original kind of Web 1.0 days to the kind of just madness that you're talking about with power densities and scale today?
No, it's not possible. Don't forget, I came from the mainframe days, right? We went from a mainframe that was larger than this room, right, to a PC that was equivalent power. And now to numbers that are staggering. A chip has more power than that mainframe. It's mind-boggling.
Absolutely. Well, I think so. Not to be funny, but I think as the New York and New Jersey unemployment agency still is on the mainframe using COBOL. So let's lead into artificial intelligence. It's certainly come to the forefront over the last couple of years. Everyone's talking about AI and large language models.
Certainly responsible for a lot of these just ridiculous power utilization and densities that I'm talking about.
So we continue to bring that forward in a lot of these events. What do you think is the biggest challenge that needs to be addressed?
So I think some of it's hidden to the infrastructure audience. To the infrastructure audience, it's all about power and cooling. And the power, look, what's happening is they're moving to regions that have a good supply of power and less competition for that power. They use hydroelectric power, but the future looks like it's going to be more like hydrogen fuel cells, renewables like solar and wind, SMRs, right? Small modular reactors, which, by the way, come with their own community issue of not in my backyard. And the future will have probably microgrids and geothermal. So that's kind of the power. On the cooling side, you need new techniques in cooling.
Mm-hmm.
Immersion is being talked about, the concerns of leakage with immersion. The hottest and latest topic, right, is direct to chip cooling. The task that's at hand with that is those tiny vessels that deliver the water have to be contamination free, which is a task unto itself. And then there's something I read about that's called two-phase cooling, which is basically a liquid that turns into a vapor that turns back to liquid, and in the process draws heat and then dissipates the heat. That's the power and cooling and infrastructure. I would go on, if you allow me to go on the other issues that are more application related. There could be bias in the applications, right? The data comes from somewhere. People may not think that, but that data comes from somewhere. If that was biased data, you could wind up with issues with hiring applications or mortgage approvals. And so you need to audit the data and use different data sources. With respect to data privacy, you need to make sure that there's not a leak of data, there's not misuse. You need to protect sensitive information. So you need to do that through encryption, anonymizing data, and having a stringent data protection policy. Ethics. You need ethics in the application. So you need probably an ethics committee and ethical guidelines, because just picture a surveillance system that's AI controlled. You think that can't cause some issues?
Well, those are challenges that have existed for a while as well. In profiling people, for instance, as an example,
Yep.
we're talking about monitoring systems. The challenge that we have is the lack of diversity, the diversity of thought, the diversity of processes. And another problem that you just touched on is the fact that data sovereignty, data privacy, who owns the data, how is it regulated? Are we having these conversations? Because these are serious concerns with privacy. Which country, which company owns the data? As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation earlier today regarding Meta, that you sign up when you get onto the likes of Facebook, that you might sign up for your data to be distributed to every organization that's in their pool, and it could be hundreds and thousands of organizations, and you don't know. With geotagging, with facial recognition, that's going to lead into those major concerns. So how do you go about just, besides passing this on to government bodies, how do we go about regulating that, whereby we still manage the privacy element and we also address the unbiased approach?
Well, we need to get companies to realize that this is a problem. I'm not sure what other conferences do as far as maybe some of the technology-focused conferences maybe talk about this. but certainly it's not being talked about in these infrastructure.
No doubt. We are trapped in this bubble, right? Where we have to build this because there are GPUs coming out and they need to be powered. And I think we have been trapped in this mindset where we are currently in a race. It's like a space race. Now we're in this AI race where what happens when you're in a race, when you are like in this mindset of build, 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 you kind of remove regulations, you remove the kind of bureaucratic hurdles associated with doing things. And it's just a huge red flag should go up to everyone to suggest that if you're expecting these companies to police themselves and at the same time, you're also expecting this hyper growth and this continued, it's not even a hockey stick. It is just a straight up and down line of the amount of power. There's just no way that the infrastructure space is going to police it because we can't even figure out where to get the power from.
So it just reminds me of the explosion in client server. You could walk in the computer room, there was wires going all around, just sprung around, right? Because nobody cared. It was about getting it done, and that's what's happening. But we do need to speak. That's why I wanted to talk today about some of these issues that certainly in this kind of an infrastructure conference are not spoken about.
No doubt. I think there is something to be said for, and just the fact that you're bringing it up is indicative of infrastructure having a responsibility to maybe not tap the brakes, but at least the kind of sanitizing impact of sunlight. Just make it known, make it aware that we have a responsibility as the builders of this infrastructure to try to put up some of these guardrails, or at least suggest that in the same way that we used to talk about ESG accords and Masons has the climate accord. It's very important, but as a business, it's important to us, not because we want to make the world so green, but because our biggest cost is power, and the more efficient you can make that power, it helps the bottom line. So we're this unique industry that doesn't just use it as a checkbox, but we actually eat our own dog food with respect to it. We have the same problem with respect to this AI. And how do we align economic benefit and make sure that the people that are pulling the strings actually recognize that if you build it so quickly that you don't have these guardrails in place, then you're going to have this kind of garbage in, garbage out, and you're not just going to accelerate good things, you're going to accelerate bad things.
Yeah. How about the fact that we're going to have to, at some point, deal with the societal impact of job loss? Because between automation, robotics, and AI, let me call them all automation, that automation is going to cost millions of jobs. And anyone who doesn't see that is not looking at reality. Okay? One of my big concerns is AI will take away some skilled jobs, but they're going to decimate entry-level jobs. And that concerns me. And when you look at it, how does somebody get started in the business? How does someone advance to the next level when they don't have the foundation? It's an issue. And beyond that, I go to the next thing would be the kids. And this is to talk what you're saying, that we rush to do something, are we realizing the impacts? Our children, even the children today, with the technology we have, they don't go out and play. They stay inside. They have problems with their eyes, with their neck, right?
Social
emotional intelligence, all that.
Obesity, right?
Yeah.
Now we go into a new generation that's going to be used to this AI, where they can either talk or click on a button and get an answer, right? Do they know where that answer came from? Are they going to actually know that? Or is it just some kids will probably be smart enough to dig in and try and understand it?
But you're going to get further and further, like a further reduced kind of thinking class. And you have to imagine that the vast majority of people are just going to just float around.
It's a serious concern.
And I don't know that it's a concern necessarily just, we're not going to put this burden on the infrastructure.
No.
Don't forget, keep on building your data centers. But I think as a society, we have to recognize, we talk about this all the time at the Nomad Futurist Foundation. Our goal is to kind of bring an educational system that has not really had a realignment since second industrial revolution is what we all say, and doesn't necessarily have the concepts of like critical thinking and really focused on soft skills and the things that really make human beings human, not just regurgitating facts or acting like robots. And the education system is designed to create good workers. Except the good workers that it was designed to create are the ones that are going to be disrupted by AI. So how do we do that? You have to start early and kind of, it's not even reskill, it's just trying to appreciate what elements of our societal fabric make us human, and then how do you kind of stoke that fire and create an environment for people to really learn.
You have actually wonderfully articulated the basis of why we founded Nomad Futurist initiatives to demystify technology for the masses, encourage the young generation to come into this place, help them identify the career pathways. You made an immaculate point about the job elimination with leveraging artificial intelligence and automation and robotics. And the fact of the matter is, as many of those jobs are going to be eliminated, we're going to be creating other jobs as well, which you don't know about today. So we need to establish this career pathway as to what the future is going to be. And of course, that element of education. So you've touched on a lot of key points and concerns. And where I'm sitting and hearing you talk about the challenges that existed in 1989, 1990 are still there. They've just grown so fast and that segregation or the divide is getting bigger and bigger. Do you think that 7x24 and or other platforms like that should entertain the idea of bringing in utilities? Should we be bringing in the application stack, the technology stack into these discussions to talk openly about the utilization metrics, efficiency, cybersecurity, privacy, standardization, and others, so that we design, build infrastructures that are modular, scalable, and gives us an opportunity to control and regulate as need be for the humankind?
Well, I think it's important to bring them all in. We've had utility companies like Con Edison in New York come to the Metro New York chapter meetings. We've had the Department of Energy come to a number of 7x24 exchange meetings. But to be honest, that was a while ago. We need to bring that back, where we get some of the people who are the regulators who delivered and some who deliver the power, as well as some of the community leaders, like they do in DC chapter. They have Buddy Reiser, the local economic guy. So if you get all the different perspectives, maybe you can make it work. It's like as if you want to build a data center in a region. People have concerns about noise, aesthetics, radiation, emissions, and the depletion of resources, both energy and water. You need to have them come together, go to leadership in those areas, speak to them, and try to, because there's billions of projects, right, that are being put on hold now all over the world. And you don't want to start a project and then have them stop it.
And part of it is this making sure that communities have kind of a stake in the outcome of the success of building and deployment of digital infrastructure. I think what we're talking about is even beyond just the people that are building it and powering it, is maybe have some of those folks that are highlighting some of the potential issues associated with some of the applications that are born out of this infrastructure present there also. So we can just be mindful of it as we develop this stuff. So we can't pretend like that's not our problem. It's somebody else's problem, because by the time we come along, it's going to be too late. You're right. Machines are going to have to take over.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is, what does the data centers bring? I mean, Amazon comes in, they can promise 1,000 jobs. Data center can't promise that. They promise maybe 50, and that's a big data center. So it would be good to find out in these communities that have had success, get the feedback and understand.
Well, that's why Buddy is so great, right? Because with Loudon, if you go to a Loudon Cowardly school, those are all funded by data center development, and the kind of the tax base has increased on that. But
I think that's sort of like the wrong narrative that we have pushed as a sector as well. Yeah, sure, it's only 50 jobs in that one building, but it's all the other opportunities that we're creating in that society as well, the community. Primo is actually a phenomenal example. It's in the middle of Timbuktu nowhere. You had your first hyperscaler going there, created plenty of opportunities, plenty of jobs, several years into it. The next one came in, next hyperscaler came in, the next came in. And it basically ended up growing the community from practically farmland to hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, that's the presentation that you have to give
Mhm.
to the community leaders, right? They don't have that. They look at the first thing. What do you give me? Oh, 50 jobs?
Well, that's why we need to engage with governments and kind of help change the metrics by which people glean whether economic development is happening. You can't use the 1960s and 70s and 80s metrics of how many, as the Beal calls it because of his English twang, bums that you're going to put in the seats in the same way, because that's just not what the digital economy just doesn't function with those same rules. So I know one of the other things that's near and dear to your heart, obviously, is workforce development. And we talk about all the time, obviously, as part of the foundation, this kind of 300,000 current job availability in our sector. We also have an industry that is aging quite rapidly, 20 years or more in the industry for 80% of the existing kind of digital infrastructure workforce. So the precipice of a mass retirement at a time when we have record-setting numbers of digital infrastructure projects globally under development. Obviously, we have our ways of trying to help at least plant the seeds early on in childhood education and trying to bring people in. What are your thoughts on talent shortages?
So let me quickly run through our history on this. In 2015, our audience at a conference told us there was a lack of talent in the pipeline. What can you do? What can 7 by 24 Exchange do to help? We then went out to schools, universities. I went, as an example, to Cal Poly with representatives from Google and Facebook at the time, Alpha Tech, and some other Silicon Valley companies. We quickly realized very brilliant mechanical and engineering, electrical engineering students and their professors had no clue about data center careers. They knew about what they're experts on what they do,
Sure.
but they didn't know about the careers. So with that, we started a STEM initiative, which included a mentoring program, a mission critical woman in mission critical operations, because we wanted to drive more women into the organization, and a Data Center 101 program, which at our spring conference, we invite students, university students and their professors free of cost. And on Sunday, for 2 hours, 5 industry experts speak to them about the different disciplines in the data center. And then they get to engage in the rest of the conference where they're meeting potential employers. They learn one of the biggest things, and I told the professors that they really learn is to speak business talk as well as technical. They can't always talk about the square root of 10 times the power of 3, whatever. So with that, we saw some momentum. And then in 2019, we went to our audience and we said to them, listen, we tried to do this. We've gone out, but we only have so much reach. You guys can really help us we're going to have International Data Center Day, which is a day, but International Data Center Day is every day. And we'll celebrate it on that one day. So they go out and they'll give a data center tour to a class, or they'll go to a classroom and speak about data center careers. I went at one point to NIA Community Services Network in Brooklyn. They deal with 50 after-school programs. And I spoke to their program directors. And when they saw what we were doing with STEM and with Data Center 101, they said, well, fuck, can you do that for elementary and high school? And so we developed then what is the data center presentation, which, by the way, Google then did and Eaton did. But what I learned there was we were hitting universities. We really had to get to the elementary and their parents because they were being steered away from these, especially women. Well, at that time, what young girl is going to be steered into an engineering job? And one lady got up and said to me, Bob, if I knew this when I was younger, I felt I didn't have a path to get
That it's hard to better articulate the way our missions as an organization, particularly on this topic, align. Which suggests to me that there's going to be plenty of Nomad Futurist 7 by 24 collaboration. But it's your experience mimics our experience when we're going to these places. But like you said, it's all about the reach and trying to make sure that we're not just doing our siloed efforts, but we are coming together as a community, as an industry, and getting in the canoe together and rowing together so that we can get to the outcome and really creating a kind of singular voice from which we're going.
So the latest that I've been telling people is we've all done great. The companies have done great, but we need local or national media. That's what we need. Well, guess what? AI did. Listen to TV. You will hear the word data center on TV today more than all of 2022. And you have voices like Jim Cramer, Kevin O'Leary. He spoke at our last conference, and he talks about AI and even in a business sense about AI. But being on TV is going to make parents and kids inquisitive. Like, what is that?
One of the things we always talk about, my kids are half Korean and half Jewish, Dr. Lawyer, Dr. Lawyer. That's all that is drowned into their heads the entire time. But the idea of wanting, like, grandparents to want their grandkids to get into digital infrastructure or these new things, it can only be achieved by, like, creating a platform that they listen to, which is, I'm not going to say traditional media, but just more traditional media that has just a reach that we can never hope to achieve.
Yeah, and I think that's happening now, and it's making a difference. Also, the colleges are doing stuff, and I give a lot of credit to the Carolinas chapter, who worked with the government and helped. Actually, they worked with Cleveland Community College, and they got a $23 million grant from the government and for a data center curriculum, which they have in that college and are willing to share with others. But I see it already in other colleges now, and I think part of it's the exposure they're seeing in the media, that they know they got to get there.
No doubt. But we together can help accelerate that process. All of this stuff should be, as we say on the application side, open sourced.
Right. Brilliant. Well, for those that are entering into the space or starting their careers, what advice would you give them?
Look, they got to be themselves, and you gotta apply yourself, work hard, be technical on what your whatever job you're going for, whether it's this industry or another industry. Try to get the technical capabilities of that. And obviously, my belief is have a personality, and I think things will work for you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and I look forward to collaborating with you. And
maybe I get one of you guys, the group, to come to a conference and speak at an event.
Absolutely. Next time you're in Jersey.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to have to go for it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Nomad Futurist Podcast. Remember, technology, markets, and challenges will continue to evolve. But those who adapt and prepare are the ones who will thrive. Embrace the change, stay curious, and let's build a future worth moving towards. The journey has just begun, and we're glad you're here with us. Visit us anytime at media.nomadfuturist.org to stay connected and be a part of the movement. Until next time, keep exploring.